The office was unusually quiet that morning. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from peace or calm. It was heavy, almost suffocating. The air conditioning hummed faintly in the background, and the soft click-clack of keyboards echoed through the open workspace. Everyone at Innovatech Solutions seemed to be glued to their screens, trying to meet deadlines while sipping lukewarm coffee from paper cups. At the far end of the floor, inside a glass-walled corner office, sat Mr. Arjun Mehta, the CEO of the I company. He was a man in his late 40s with sharp features, salt and pepper hair, and an aura of authority that commanded respect. His desk was always spotless, no loose papers, no clutter, just a sleek laptop, a framed photo of his family, and a leather-bound planner. People often said he ran his business like clockwork, but what they didn't know was how lonely life had become for him behind those polished walls. It wasn't always this way. When Arjun started Innovatech 2 decades ago, he poured his heart into building something meaningful. Back then, he knew every employee by name, celebrated birthdays with cake in the break room, and stayed late just to help struggling interns debug their code. But as the years went by and the company grew bigger, priorities shifted. Deals became more important than people. Numbers mattered more than relationships. And somewhere along the way, Arjun stopped seeing the faces behind the emails and reports. That morning, however, something unusual happened. As Arjun reviewed quarterly projections on his laptop, there was a knock on his door. Before he could respond, the handle turned, and a young boy peeked inside. He couldn't have been older than 10. His clothes were slightly oversized. A faded t-shirt tucked haphazardly into jeans held up by a fraying belt. His sneakers were scuffed and his backpack looked like it had seen better days. Despite all this, his eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Mr. Mehta?" the boy asked hesitantly, gripping the strap of his backpack tightly. Arjun blinked, momentarily confused. "Yes? Can I help you?" "I'm Rohan," the boy replied, stepping fully into the room. "My dad works here. He told me to wait outside. But I got bored." For a moment, Arjun didn't know what to say. This was unprecedented. Employees rarely brought their children to work, let alone allowed them to wander into the CEO's office unannounced. Yet there was something about Rohan's innocence and boldness that intrigued Arjun. Instead of dismissing him, he gestured toward one of the chairs across from his desk. "Well, Rohan," Arjun said, leaning back in his chair, "what brings you here today?" Rohan hesitated before answering. "Dad says you're the boss of everything, so I wanted to see if it's true." A small smile tugged at the corners of Arjun's lips. "Your dad is right. I am the boss. What else would you like to know?" The question seemed to light a fire in Rohan. He sat up straighter, his earlier nervousness melting away. "Do you get to tell everyone what to do, like superheroes in movies?" Arjun chuckled softly. "Not exactly like superheroes, but yes, I make decisions that affect the company. Sometimes those decisions are hard." Rohan tilted his head, clearly fascinated. "Why are they hard?" This was new territory for Arjun. No one, not even his closest colleagues, had ever asked him such a direct question. Usually, people tiptoed around him, afraid to overstep boundaries. But Rohan's wide-eyed curiosity disarmed him completely. "They're hard," Arjun explained slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Because sometimes what's best for the company isn't easy for everyone. For example, we might need to cut costs, which means some people lose their jobs. Or we might have to push really hard to finish a project, which means long hours for everyone." Rohan frowned thoughtfully. "Doesn't that make people sad?" "Yes," Arjun admitted after a pause. "Sometimes it does." The honesty of the conversation caught Arjun off guard. He hadn't spoken so openly about the weight of leadership in years. Most days he buried himself in spreadsheets and meetings, avoiding any emotional connection to the consequences of his choices. But here was this child, forcing him to confront things he'd rather ignore. Before Arjun could say anything else, Rohan changed the subject. "Can I ask you another question?" "Of course. What's your favorite part about being the boss?" Arjun leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. He hadn't expected that question either. After a moment, he said, "Honestly, my favorite part used to be helping people grow. Seeing someone start as an intern and then rise to lead a team, it felt amazing. It made me proud." "Used to?" Rohan repeated, picking up on the past tense. Arjun sighed. "Things change when a company gets bigger. Now I spend most of my time dealing with numbers and strategies. I don't interact with employees as much as I'd like to anymore." Rohan's expression turned serious. "That sounds boring." Arjun laughed despite himself. "You're not wrong." Just then the door opened again and a flustered man rushed in. It was Rahul Kumar, one of Innovatech's senior developers, and Rohan's father. "Sir, I'm so sorry," Rahul stammered, bowing slightly. "I told him to stay put, but he must have wandered off." "It's fine, Rahul," Arjun interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "Your son and I were having an interesting chat." Rahul glanced between Arjun and Rohan, visibly unsure of what to say. "He didn't cause any trouble, did he?" "Not at all," Arjun assured him. Turning to Rohan, he added, "In fact, your son gave me quite a bit to think about." Rohan grinned proudly, looking up at his father. "I told him he should talk to people more." Rahul's face flushed red with embarrassment. "Please forgive him, sir. He has a habit of speaking his mind." "There's nothing to forgive," Arjun said firmly. Then, addressing Rohan, he added, "Thank you for stopping by, Rohan. Maybe next time we can plan a proper visit." As Rahul ushered Rohan out of the office, Arjun found himself staring at the closed door. The encounter had lasted less than 15 minutes, yet it left a lasting impression. For the first time in years, he felt a pang of regret, not just for losing touch with his employees, but for letting the human side of his job slip away. That evening, as Arjun sat alone in his study at home, he couldn't stop thinking about Rohan's questions. They lingered in his mind like ripples in still water, forcing him to reflect on the choices he'd made and the person he'd become. Slowly, an idea began to form, one that could change not only his life but also the lives of countless others. At Innovatech, little did he know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would redefine everything he thought he knew about leadership, responsibility, and the true meaning of success. That night, Arjun couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the conversation with Rohan, the boy's innocent questions, his unfiltered honesty, and the way he saw the world so differently from adults. As Arjun lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he realized something unsettling. He envied Rohan. Not because the boy was carefree or young, but because Rohan still believed in possibilities. He hadn't been worn down by compromises, responsibilities, or failures. To Rohan, life was simple. People mattered and actions had meaning. By morning, Arjun felt restless. For the first time in years, he didn't dive straight into emails or meetings. Instead, he took a long walk around the neighborhood, letting his thoughts wander. The streets were alive with activity, vendors setting up stalls, children playing, cricket on the sidewalk, and elderly couples chatting on park benches. It struck him how connected everyone seemed, even in their small routines. He wondered when he had stopped feeling connected to the people around him. When he returned home, he made a decision. That day, instead of holing up in his office like usual, he would spend time among his employees. He wanted to see Innovatech Solutions through fresh eyes, to understand what it meant to work there beyond profit margins and performance metrics. Step into their shoes. At 9 a.m., Arjun arrived at the office earlier than usual. He bypassed his executive assistant, who looked surprised but said nothing, and headed straight for the cafeteria. It was bustling with activity, employees grabbing coffee, sharing jokes, and discussing weekend plans. No one noticed him standing quietly near the entrance, observing. He spotted a group of junior developers huddled together, animatedly debating coding techniques. Nearby, two women laughed over mismatched socks, one wearing polka dots, the other stripes. A janitor whistled softly as he wiped down tables, nodding politely to passers-by. These moments felt ordinary, yet they carried a warmth that Arjun hadn't noticed before. "Sir?" A hesitant voice interrupted his thoughts. Arjun turned to see Priya, a mid-level manager holding a tray of tea. Her expression was a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Is everything okay? You're here." "I'm fine," Arjun replied with a small smile. "Just thought I'd grab some breakfast." Priya blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. After an awkward pause, she gestured toward her table. "Would you like to join us?" For a second, Arjun hesitated. Sitting with employees during meals wasn't something he did, but today felt different. "Sure," he said finally, following her to the table. The others greeted him politely but stiffly. Conversation slowed as they adjusted to having their CEO seated among them. Determined to break the ice, Arjun asked about their projects. At first, responses were cautious. One-word answers, vague nods. But gradually they opened up. They talked about challenges they faced, ideas they were excited about, and frustrations they hadn't voiced before. One developer, a young man named Karan, mentioned how difficult it was to balance deadlines with learning new skills. Another, employee Mira, shared her struggle to manage both work and childcare responsibilities. Listening to them, Arjun realized how much he'd missed by staying distant. These weren't just workers. They were individuals with dreams, fears, and lives outside the office. A glimpse behind closed doors. After breakfast, Arjun decided to take his experiment further. He visited various departments, asking questions and listening intently. In the design team, he learned about creative blocks and tight timelines. In customer support, he heard stories of irate clients and unsolvable issues. Each interaction revealed a side of Innovatech he hadn't considered. His final stop was the IT department, where Rahul Kumar worked. When Arjun entered, Rahul looked up from his monitor, startled. "Sir, what brings you here?" "I thought I'd check in," Arjun said casually. "How are things going?" Rahul hesitated, glancing at his colleagues. "Things are good. Busy as always." Arjun nodded. "And Rohan, how is he adjusting to school?" At the mention of his son, Rahul relaxed slightly. "He's doing well, sir. Keeps asking when he can visit again." He chuckled nervously. "I hope he didn't bother you too much yesterday." "Not at all," Arjun assured him. "In fact, he gave me a lot to think about." Rahul raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, he offered to show Arjun some updates on their latest project, a software tool designed to streamline internal processes. As they walked through rows of cubicles, Rahul explained technical details, occasionally pausing to answer questions. What struck Arjun most wasn't the complexity of the project, but the passion in Rahul's voice. Despite long hours and mounting pressure, Rahul spoke with genuine enthusiasm. It reminded Arjun of himself 20 years ago, when every challenge felt like an opportunity. Moments of reflection. Later that afternoon, Arjun retreated to his office, overwhelmed by what he'd experienced. The day had been eye-opening, but it also left him with a growing sense of unease. He realized how disconnected he'd become, not just from his employees, but from the very purpose that had driven him to start Innovatech. Sitting at his desk, he pulled out a blank notebook and began jotting down notes. Ideas flowed freely: initiatives to improve work-life balance, mentorship programs for younger employees, regular town halls to foster open communication. For the first time in years, he felt inspired, but inspiration alone wasn't enough. Arjun knew implementing these changes wouldn't be easy. Resistance could come from shareholders, senior executives, or even employees accustomed to the status quo. Yet deep down, he believed it was worth trying. As evening approached, Arjun called his executive assistant and canceled his remaining appointments. He needed time to process everything. Before leaving the office, he stopped by Rahul's desk. "Thank you," Arjun said sincerely, "for showing me your work today, and for bringing Rohan into my life." Rahul looked taken aback. "Sir, No need to say anything," Arjun interrupted gently. "Just thank you." On the drive home, Arjun's mind raced with possibilities. He thought about Rohan's question, doesn't that make people sad? Yes, some decisions did cause sadness, but maybe, just maybe, he could find ways to minimize it, to create a workplace where people felt valued, not just productive. That night, as Arjun sat in his study drafting plans for change, he felt a spark of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be smooth, but he was ready to take the first step. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he imagined Rohan smiling proudly. The next morning, Arjun arrived at the office with a renewed sense of purpose. Gone was the usual stiffness in his posture. Instead, he walked briskly, his steps lighter, his mind buzzing with ideas. For the first time in years, he felt excited about work, not because of profits or accolades, but because he believed he could make a difference. As he settled into his chair, Arjun opened the notebook from the previous evening. Pages were filled with scribbles, diagrams, and bullet points. Some ideas were bold, like introducing flexible work hours for all employees. Others were simpler, like organizing monthly team lunches to encourage bonding. But one idea stood out more than the rest: creating an open forum where employees could voice their concerns directly to him without fear of judgment or retaliation. Arjun knew this wasn't going to be easy. People had grown accustomed to keeping their opinions to themselves, especially when it came to criticizing leadership. Building trust would take time, but he was determined to start somewhere. Announcing the new initiative. At 10 a.m., Arjun called an impromptu meeting. Normally, such gatherings required weeks of planning, but today, he wanted spontaneity. He sent a company-wide email asking everyone to gather in the main conference hall within 30 minutes. Employees exchanged puzzled glances as they filed into the room, murmuring among themselves. When Arjun stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. His presence commanded attention, but this time there was no PowerPoint presentation or lengthy speech about quarterly goals. Instead, he stood there quietly, looking out at the sea of faces before him. "Good morning," he began, his tone warm yet firm. "I know this is unexpected, so I'll get straight to the point. Over the past few days, I've done something unusual. I've spent time listening to you. Not as numbers on a report, but as individuals with stories, challenges, and aspirations." Ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. No one had expected their CEO to say something like this. "What I learned has stayed with me," Arjun continued. "It reminded me why I started this company. To create a place where people could thrive, not just survive. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that, and for that I take responsibility." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was eerily quiet now, everyone leaning forward slightly, hanging on to his every word. "To fix this, I'm launching a new initiative called Open Door Fridays. Every Friday afternoon, my door will be open to anyone who wants to talk about anything. Your concerns, your ideas, even your frustrations. Nothing is off limits." Gasps rippled through the audience. Open communication with the CEO? It sounded too good to be true. "I understand trust isn't built overnight," Arjun added. "But I promise you, I'm committed to making Innovatech a better place. For all of us." The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then grew louder and more enthusiastic. Employees looked at each other, some smiling, others nodding in approval. For many, it felt like a turning point. Testing the waters. That Friday, Arjun kept his promise. He cleared his schedule, turned off his phone, and waited. At first, the silence in his office was deafening. Would anyone actually show up? Doubts crept in, but he pushed them aside. Change took patience. By noon, the first visitor arrived. It was Mira, the employee who had spoken about balancing work and childcare during breakfast earlier in the week. She knocked softly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Come in," Arjun called out. Mira hesitated before stepping inside. "Sir, I wasn't sure if I should come." "You're welcome here," Arjun reassured her. "Please, sit down." She perched on the edge of the chair, visibly nervous. "Thank you, sir. I wanted to share something. My son's school timings conflict with our current work hours, and it's been hard managing both. I love my job, but sometimes it feels impossible." Arjun listened intently, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he leaned forward. "Mira, thank you for sharing this. You shouldn't have to choose between being a great parent and a great employee. Let's find a solution together." Over the next hour, they brainstormed options, adjusting her start time, allowing remote work on certain days, and exploring childcare benefits. By the end of the conversation, Mira left with tears in her eyes, thanking him profusely. Word spread quickly. By the afternoon, a line formed outside Arjun's office. Some came with grievances, others with suggestions. One developer proposed hosting weekly coding workshops to help junior staff improve their skills. Another employee suggested setting up a wellness program to address mental health issues. Each conversation left Arjun inspired and humbled. Resistance from above. Not everyone was pleased with Arjun's new approach. Later that evening, he received a call from Mr. Kapoor, a senior board member and one of the largest shareholders. "Arjun, what's this nonsense about open-door Fridays?" Kapoor demanded without preamble. "You can't afford to waste your time on trivial matters. We have targets to meet." Arjun sighed, bracing himself for the inevitable pushback. "Mr. Kapoor, these aren't trivial matters. They're the foundation of our success. Happy employees lead to better results." Kapoor scoffed. "Happy employees don't pay dividends. If you keep pandering to them, our stock price will suffer." "I disagree," Arjun replied firmly. "Investing in our people is the smartest decision we can make. Give me 6 months. If you don't see improvements, I'll reconsider." There was a long pause on the other end. Finally, Kapoor relented, though reluctantly. 6 months, Arjun, that's all you get." After hanging up, Arjun rubbed his temples. He knew resistance from higher-ups would be challenging, but he couldn't back down now, not when he saw how much this meant to his employees. Heartfelt connection. Later that week, Rohan's father, Rahul, stopped by Arjun's office again. This time it wasn't for updates on projects, it was personal. "Sir, I wanted to thank you," Rahul said, his voice thick with emotion. "Since you announced Open Door Fridays, things feel different. Like we matter." Arjun smiled, warmly. "You do matter, Rahul. All of you do." Rahul hesitated before adding, "Rohan keeps asking when he can visit again. He says you're his hero now." The comment caught Arjun off guard. Hero? He hadn't thought of himself that way in years. Yet hearing those words stirred something deep within him, a reminder of why he'd embarked on this journey in the first place. "Tell Rohan I said hello," Arjun replied softly. "And tell him, heroes are made when people care enough to try." As Rahul left, Arjun sat back in his chair, reflecting on the day's events. Yes, there would be obstacles ahead, skeptical board members, logistical challenges, and moments of doubt. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. Alive in a way that went beyond titles and achievements. He was rebuilding connections, fostering trust, and rediscovering the heart of leadership. Little did he know this was only the beginning. The seeds of change had been planted, and soon they would blossom into something extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, Arjun's Open Door Fridays initiative began to take root. What started as a trickle of employees visiting his office turned into a steady stream. Each conversation brought fresh insights, challenges, and opportunities. For many, it was the first time they felt truly heard by someone in leadership. Slowly but surely, the culture at Innovatech Solutions began to shift. Moments of transformation. One Friday afternoon, Arjun found himself speaking with Karan, the junior developer who had mentioned struggling to balance learning new skills with meeting tight deadlines. Karan sat nervously across from him, clutching a notebook filled with ideas. "Sir," Karan began hesitantly, I've been thinking about how we can improve our training programs. Right now, most of us learn on the job, which is great, but sometimes it feels overwhelming. I was wondering if we could have dedicated mentorship sessions maybe once a week. It might help everyone grow faster. Arjun nodded thoughtfully. That's an excellent suggestion, Karan. Let's explore it further. Who do you think would make good mentors? Karan brightened at the question. There are senior developers who love teaching. They just need the platform. If we pair them with juniors like me, it could work wonders. By the end of their discussion, Arjun had outlined a plan to pilot a mentorship program. Within weeks, it became one of the most popular initiatives at Innovatech. Employees eagerly signed up, both as mentors and mentees. The camaraderie that blossomed between teams was palpable. People were no longer isolated cogs in a machine. They were part of a thriving community. Another memorable visit came from Priya, the mid-level manager Arjun had met during his cafeteria walk. She arrived with a folder full of data and charts, her confidence evident. Sir, I've analyzed employee feedback from the past year, Priya explained. A recurring issue is burnout. People are working long hours without breaks, and it's affecting productivity. Arjun frowned. What do you propose? Priya leaned forward, her eyes alight with determination. We should introduce mandatory breaks, short intervals throughout the day for stretching or mindfulness exercises. Studies show it boosts focus and reduces stress. Intrigued, Arjun asked her to draft a proposal. Within days, the company implemented mindful moments, a policy encouraging employees to step away from their desks for 10 minutes every 2 hours. To everyone's surprise, productivity soared. Teams reported feeling more energized and creative, a testament to Priya's insight. Challenges along the way. Despite the positive changes, not everything went smoothly. Change always comes with resistance, and Innovatech was no exception. Some senior managers grumbled about the new policies, claiming they disrupted workflow. Others dismissed Open Door Fridays as a fleeting trend, predicting it would fade once. Quarterly reports rolled in. The biggest challenge, however, came from outside the company. Shareholders grew increasingly restless. Mr. Kapoor called another emergency meeting, this time joined by other board members. Arjun, your experiments are costing us money, Kapoor snapped. Our competitors are gaining ground while we waste resources on frivolous programs. Arjun remained calm, though his jaw tightened slightly. These aren't frivolous programs, Mr. Kapoor. They're investments in our people, and they're paying off. Productivity has increased. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and turnover rates have dropped significantly. But what about profits? Another board member interjected. Numbers don't lie. Arjun opened a folder and slid a report across the table. Here are the numbers. Revenue is stable, operating costs are down due to improved efficiency, and client retention has improved thanks to happier teams delivering better results. Give it time, and you'll see even greater returns. The board members exchanged skeptical glances but didn't argue further. For now, Arjun had bought himself more time, but he knew he couldn't rely solely on goodwill forever. He needed concrete proof that his vision worked. A child's perspective. Amid the chaos of change, Rohan continued to play a pivotal role, albeit indirectly. One evening, Rahul brought his son to the office again, this time officially invited by Arjun. Rohan bounded into the CEO's office, his backpack bouncing against his back. Mr. Mehta, he exclaimed, plopping onto the chair opposite Arjun's desk. Dad says you're helping lots of people now, is that true? Arjun chuckled. I'm trying my best, Rohan. Why do you ask? Rohan tilted his head as if pondering a deep mystery. Because heroes help people, right? But real heroes listen too. The simplicity of the statement struck Arjun. It wasn't enough to act. He had to keep listening, to stay grounded in the reality of his employees' lives. Later that night, Rohan drew a picture for Arjun, a stick-figure superhero surrounded by smiling faces. At the bottom, he'd written in crooked letters, "To Mr. Mehta, the best hero ever." Arjun pinned the drawing above his desk, where it served as a constant reminder of his mission. Building bridges. As the weeks passed, Arjun noticed subtle yet profound shifts in the workplace. Conversations in hallways sounded warmer. Smiles replaced frowns. Even the janitors seemed prouder of their roles, knowing their contributions mattered. One particularly touching moment occurred when Mira approached Arjun after implementing her flexible schedule. Her eyes shone with gratitude. "Sir, thank you," she said softly. "My son got selected for a science fair last week. None of that would have happened if I hadn't been able to adjust my timings. You've changed our lives." Arjun felt a lump rise in his throat. "Don't thank me, Mira. Thank yourself for having the courage to speak up." Word of these stories spread beyond Innovatech. Local newspapers picked up on the transformation, praising Arjun's leadership style. Articles highlighted how a single decision to listen had sparked a cultural revolution. Competitors took notice, some even adopting similar practices. Yet for Arjun, the true reward wasn't external validation. It was seeing his employees thrive, not just professionally, but personally. He realized leadership wasn't about wielding power. It was about empowering others. Looking ahead, 6 months flew by, and Arjun prepared for another board meeting. This time, however, he walked in with confidence. The data spoke for itself. Higher profits, lower attrition, and glowing employee reviews. When Mr. Kapoor raised an eyebrow skeptically, Arjun simply smiled. "We've proven that caring for people isn't a liability, it's an asset," he declared. And this is just the beginning. The board members exchanged glances, then nodded reluctantly. Arjun had won them over, not through force but through results. As he left the meeting room, Arjun allowed himself a rare moment of pride. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready. With each step forward, he was reshaping not only Innovatech but also his own legacy. Little did he know, the ripple effect of his actions was spreading farther than he imagined, inspiring others to rethink what it meant to lead with heart. 1 year had passed since Arjun first opened the doors of his office to employees. What began as a small experiment had grown into a movement, a culture shift that transformed Innovatech Solutions from the inside out. The company was no longer just a place where people worked. It had become a community where they belonged. Arjun stood on the balcony of his office, gazing at the bustling workspace below. Gone were the days of silent cubicles and hurried footsteps. Now laughter echoed through the corridors, and collaborative discussions replaced terse emails. Teams gathered in cozy breakout areas, brainstorming ideas over cups of coffee. Even the janitors joined in the camaraderie, exchanging jokes with developers during breaks. It wasn't perfect, there were still challenges, but the spirit of innovation and care had taken root, and for Arjun, that made all the difference. A celebration of change. To mark the 1-year anniversary of Open Door Fridays, Arjun organized a special event. Instead of a formal boardroom meeting, he rented a nearby banquet hall and invited everyone, from interns to senior executives, to celebrate together. The theme was simple: gratitude. As employees filed into the hall, they found their names written on placards placed at round tables adorned with flowers. A massive screen displayed photos capturing moments from the past year: team outings, mentorship sessions, candid snapshots of employees smiling and collaborating. At the center of the room stood a stage where Arjun waited nervously but excitedly. When the crowd settled, Arjun stepped up to the microphone. The room fell silent, anticipation hanging thick in the air. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the flutter in his chest. "Today, we're not here to talk about profits or deadlines. We're here to celebrate something far more important: each other." Applause erupted and Arjun paused, letting the warmth wash over him. "A year ago, I made a decision to listen, not because I had all the answers, but because I realized I didn't. I needed your voices, your stories, your dreams. Together, we've built something extraordinary, something that goes beyond numbers on a spreadsheet." He glanced around the room, his gaze resting briefly on familiar faces: Mira, who now balanced work and motherhood seamlessly. Karen, whose confidence had skyrocketed thanks to mentorship. Priya, whose bold ideas had reshaped workplace policies. And Rahul, whose son Rohan had unknowingly sparked this journey. I want to thank each of you, not just for your hard work, but for trusting me enough to share your truths. Because of you, Innovatech is stronger, happier, and more united than ever before. Tears welled up in some eyes while others nodded in agreement. Arjun took a deep breath before continuing. But this isn't the end. It's only the beginning. Our mission moving forward is clear: to continue growing, not just as professionals but as human beings, to lift each other up, to innovate fearlessly, and to lead with compassion. The applause that followed was thunderous. Employees cheered, hugged, and wiped away tears. For many, this moment felt like validation, not just of their efforts, but of their worth. Rohan's gift. After the speeches and dinner, Arjun slipped outside for some fresh air. As he leaned against the railing, staring at the stars, a small figure approached. "Mr. Mehta?" came a familiar voice. Arjun turned to see Rohan standing there, clutching a wrapped gift box. His heart swelled at the sight of the boy who had started it all. "Rohan, what are you doing here?" "My dad said I could come tonight," Rohan replied proudly. "I brought you something." Curious, Arjun knelt down to accept the package. He carefully unwrapped it to reveal a handmade photo frame. Inside was a picture of him surrounded by employees, laughing during one of the team lunches. Scrawled across the bottom in colorful markers were the words, "Thank you for listening." Arjun blinked back tears. "This is incredible, Rohan. Did you make this yourself?" Rohan nodded enthusiastically. "Dad helped me glue the edges, but I did the rest. Heroes deserve gifts, right?" Arjun chuckled softly. "You're absolutely right. Thank you, Rohan. This means more to me than you can imagine." As Rohan beamed, Arjun pulled him into a gentle hug. In that moment, he realized how much he'd gained, not just as a leader, but as a person. This little boy, with his boundless curiosity and unshakable belief in goodness, had reminded him what truly mattered. Beyond the office walls. The ripple effect of Arjun's leadership extended far beyond Innovatech. Competitors began adopting similar practices, inspired by the success stories circulating in the media. Industry conferences invited Arjun to speak about his approach, and soon, he became a champion for empathetic leadership worldwide. But Arjun never let fame go to his head. He remained grounded, always prioritizing the well-being of his employees above accolades. When asked during an interview what drove him, he simply smiled and said, "People matter. That's all there is to it." His philosophy resonated deeply, sparking conversations about workplace culture globally. Schools incorporated case studies of Innovatech into their curriculums, teaching students the importance of empathy and leadership. Nonprofits reached out, seeking advice on fostering inclusive environments. Slowly but surely, Arjun's vision spread, touching lives far beyond what he could have imagined. A new chapter. 2 years after the launch of Open Door Fridays, Arjun decided it was time for another change. Not for himself, but for Innovatech. He announced his decision to step down as CEO, passing the reins to Priya, whose innovative thinking and dedication had earned her the respect of the entire organization. "I'm not leaving," Arjun assured everyone during the announcement. "I'll still be involved, mentoring and guiding whenever needed, but it's time for someone else to take the helm, to carry this legacy forward." Priya accepted the role with humility and determination, promising to uphold the values Arjun had instilled. On her first day as CEO, she introduced a new initiative: Community Fridays. Every Friday, employees would volunteer at local shelters, schools, or environmental projects, giving back to the society that supported them. Watching from the sidelines, Arjun felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His job wasn't done. He would continue mentoring leaders, writing books, and speaking at events. But he knew Innovatech was in good hands. More importantly, he knew its impact would endure. The heart of leadership. Years later, when Arjun looked back on his life, he realized his greatest achievement wasn't building a successful company. It was creating a space where people felt valued, where they laughed, grew, and thrived, where a child's innocent question could spark a revolution. In the end, leadership wasn't about titles or power. It was about connection, about seeing the humanity in others and nurturing it, about listening, not just with ears but with hearts. And as Arjun sat in his study surrounded by mementos of his journey, he smiled. Somewhere out there, Rohan was probably dreaming up new adventures, and somewhere within Innovatech, countless others were doing the same, because true leadership doesn't end, it inspires others to carry the torch.